Anecdotes for success. Level up with truth, meaning, trade-offs, perspective.
Well, hi, Matt. Matt, you've met Paul. Paul, you've met Matt.
Yes.
We're having a few video issues with Matt, but we're gonna keep this podcast going because we have in person my mentor and other business partner besides Matt, Paul Bast. Thanks for coming on today, Paul.
Happy to be here.
Paul has 30 years experience in the financial industry, 27 offices, 350 advisors under him, approaching 350 million in assets under management. And he's in 15 plus states and growing. And I'm part of his team now. So it's kind of what kickstarted me with my own business. That's what Matt and I have talked about in the past. And Matt's been a great mentor to me as far as some of the things I'm doing. And now in person, I have Paul here. So it's like I've got my two favorite people in the world, besides my family. Right here. I had to say that.
I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did. You know, it like we've spoken about it before. It's, you know, it just goes to show wherever you are in life, there's always opportunity, right? There's always other things you can do. And Paul, I'm sure, you know, you'll speak to that a bit on your end. I'm actually interested in hearing, because we haven't had much of a conversation, which is good, what we wanted, because that makes it, you know, much better. But, you know, fill me in a little bit, or fill us in a little bit. Like, what's your story?
Well, you know, my story briefly is I did everything that I thought I was supposed to do to be successful. I studied hard in school. I got good grades. I was one of the first people in my family to go on to university, the first person in my immediate family. Went to school. I got a 4-year social work degree, social work psychology, double major, and got out into the world of good jobs. And I just thought I was doing all the right things. And I distinctly remember about six months into my first sort of corporate type, you know, social work position, which I'm from Ontario, Canada originally. I live in Florida now. But
I could tell when you said university that you were Canadian.
Yes. And I just remember waking up one day, and I was probably 22 years old. And I woke up one day and I said to myself, is this it? Like, this is the dream. Like, this is what I've worked so hard for, is basically getting up every day and going into a job I really didn't like that much, getting paid like not enough to live on. And I just woke up, you know, super disillusioned. And I thought, wow, like, kind of sucks to be disillusioned at 22. You're supposed to be, you know, looking forward to the future. And my wife and I had been married for, you know, just maybe about 6 or 12 months at that point in time. And so I started to explore how to get better, how to improve myself. And I was heading toward a graduate degree, and I was heading to do what Coach Richmond does, which is essentially coach, teach, do social studies, psychology, life skills, that kind of thing at the high school level. And what happened is a good friend of mine who was a restaurant owner came up to me one night. I was actually moonlighting as his bartender. So that'll tell you I was working, you know, I was doing side hustles in the 80s to make extra money. And that was before side hustles were popular. It was called moonlighting back then, and it wasn't actually considered to be a very respectable thing to do. You probably remember that, Matt.
I do, yes.
Back when moonlighting was shameful, because it's like, well, don't you make enough money at your regular job? Like, what are you, a loser? You're working a second job? Like, what's wrong with you?
Exactly.
So clearly side hustle culture had not taken over at that point. So I'm working at the bar at my friend's restaurant. He comes up to me and he says, one night, he goes, direct quote, he said, buddy, I have a business opportunity I want to share with you. I've got a guy coming over in a couple of nights to the restaurant. I want you to meet him. Be here Tuesday night at 9:00. And my response was, you talk, I listen. So what's the lesson in that? I was open-minded. You know, your mind is a powerful, powerful tool However, it only works when it's open. And everything I have today, all, being financially independent and the lifestyle we have, I can trace back to my response to my friend approaching me with an opportunity. And I had no idea what it was. I actually thought he wanted me to, come in equity on the restaurant or something like that. And I said, buddy, you talk, I listen. And it ended up, he introduced me to getting into the financial industry, and I did. And it's worked out. So
Well,
that's my origin story. The only other thing I'd add really is that I was really feeling regretful that I hadn't, like back then, the thing you did after college or whatever, sometimes people did it after high school, is you went backpacking in Europe. And I've always loved travel. I always wanted to, my family weren't travelers. I always wanted to see the world. And because I got married right after college and quickly got, an apartment, then we got a mortgage, then I got car payments. All of a sudden I had to work to pay bills, and I hadn't done the Europe thing. So the reason I got into the financial industry is I thought, if I can work hard and do well and generate good cash flow, I could take maybe a month or two off, which was never going to be possible in my job, but I could work really, really hard for, say, 6 months, make extra money, and I could take 2, 3 months and I could backpack through Europe. So I basically tell people that I pretty much got into this business because I wanted to backpack around Europe, and this was my only way I could see to do it. So it wasn't deep. It wasn't like super, the decision wasn't a big philosophical thing. I didn't have an epiphany or anything like that. It was just basically simple. I wanted to backpack around in Europe and have freedom, and I thought this was a way I could do it. So
well,
that's
you
my
use
story.
it's a great story. It's there's so many things within it that just
Yeah.
resonate with me and probably resonate with a tremendous number of people. What I admire about you, Paul, is you were willing to look at it and go. You said you were disillusioned. I think that most people. I think that most people are disillusioned. You talk about this is it. I'm going to do this for 40 years in a job that I don't really love,
That's right.
40 hours minimum a week, so that someday, hopefully my joints hold up and then I can live my golden years. And,
Yeah.
and even those aren't the golden years that for most people that you think they're going to be, and then I just feel, I feel like that story is so common, but the problem is twofold. One, most people aren't willing to admit to themselves that they're living that story, because then they're admitting then it sounds like failure. It's not failure, but it seems like failure. Nobody wants to say, "Hey, I failed," right? And then two, what do they do about it? And they don't really know then what to do about it. You were fortunate that you had somebody who brought you, gave you an opportunity, and you were smart enough to go, I don't know what I don't know. I'm going to shut my mouth and listen, right?
Absolutely. Exactly.
By making that decision, you clearly changed your world forever. And Paul, I don't know you, but if you're hanging out with the other Paul, you can't be that exceptional. So if you any more than I am, by the way. But my point is, it's such a great lesson. People need to see. Now, here you are living a life that I assume is much different than what you thought your life was going to be. Much more, you use a word that I always use, freedom. It's the most important word in my language. And you're living a life that you probably could never have obtained had you not taken these steps. And I love everything about that. Everything.
Thank you. Hey, well, listen, coming from you, I appreciate that. I know you're a business legend around in these parts, and that you've built some incredible assets and continue to do so. So I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a great ride. And I mean, there's no question that, there've been particular action steps that I've taken, beyond being open, beyond being willing to try, beyond being willing to start. And I would say the way I would sum those up is just, I just my focus was always just to compete with a previous version of myself. And I still do that to this day. Like, as long as I'm getting better, it just seems that my business continues to grow. And I feel like the minute I stop getting better, then probably my business is going to stagnate. And so really just being focused on constant improvement. The last 18 months or so has been a real revelation, because I've really learned, I'm not great at it yet, but I've been learning how to use different social media platforms, particularly Twitter, to meet incredible people like Coach Rich here, who I met on Twitter, and now we're good buddies. We're gonna be friends for life, and we met on the internet. So I've been leveraging that, and that's been a real revelation, and so that's been a real growth for me. And just now building a completely remote team of great leaders all over the United States has just, I'm just having the most fun I've ever had. And so one of the things that, if anybody's wondering, what would it be like to be in an equity type position, build a brokerage or an agency in financial services, the number one thing that I can say to recommend it is to say that I've been doing the same thing, the same business, working with the same firm for almost 32 years. And I am more excited to get up today and do the work that I choose to do. I'm more excited about it today than I was the day I started. And I was excited the day I started. I was scared to death, but I was excited. So you show me somebody who's been doing the same thing for over 30 years and they're more excited today than they were. And if you're paying attention, you should be taking a hard look at that business, because that, I think that's very rare air. And I'm just grateful that I'm a part of a business that I can say that, because that's what life's about, man. If you can't say that, man, I really feel for you, because that means that your life is probably going downhill, not uphill, and uphill's better. So, and I think you probably feel the same way about your business interest as well, Matt.
Paul, I do. And what you're saying is so important. And what I think is important for people to understand is what you're talking about, in my opinion, is because there's a level of risk, there's a level of unknown, there's things going on, things that many people are afraid of. They want security and they want safety, and they think that comes from a job that just offers them a paycheck on a regular basis. And although there's something to that, I suppose, although I don't live in that world, and I would never go back to it. I would never go back to it. My God, it gives me the creepy crawlies of thought of going back to that.
Me too, man.
What, and I could hear it in your voice, the idea of this, the passion and the meaning, and I talk about it in our 4 pillars, the meaning you get from doing something that I don't want to say it only exists in business. I'm sure it doesn't only exist in business. That's where I found it. You've found it as well. But you've got to have something that gets you out of bed, that's more important than that check that arrives every week or 2 weeks or whatever it is, and carries a level of unknown to it that provides that meaning. And I know more people, Paul, that have so much potential who've never realized it and never will realize it, because they're living in a world that says, "Oh, I just want to be safe, and I want to make sure that I'm taken care of." And I find it to be sad, and because they don't get to be the Matt that I get to be, or the Paul that you get to be. Or the Paul that the other Paul gets to be, by chasing these things and doing these things. And I'm sure you would agree, Paul, it's not about the money. It's not about how much money can I accumulate. I mean, there might be some aspect of that to your life. There certainly is to mine, but it's not the everything, all be end all. And unless you're living in this world, the world that you seem to certainly be living in, and the world that I'm living in, I can't possibly describe to someone what that feeling is. And like you just said, and I said, and the number of entrepreneurs or business people that I know who look and go, I could never go back to that. Those, unless you live in this world, there's no way for you to understand what it's like. And I try to communicate that to people, and it unfortunately falls on deaf ears 95% of the time.
You know what? You know what gets my students thinking? Sorry, I'm not going to talk much this episode. I just
You
know
need
what
me
you
to.
do because you guys are awesome. You don't need me. One thing that always gets my students thinking is when I say, "Why do you want to work?" And they say, "Well, I want to make a lot of money so I can go do things and retire." And then I give them a list of names of people, and I'm like, "Well, what do they have in common?" I go, "They don't really ever retire. They find their purpose, they find their system, they find their business model that works, and they don't ever stop doing it because it means so much to them. Like, you're chasing the wrong idea if you think you can just accumulate this pile of money and stop doing what you're doing and be happy, right? We talk about happiness all the time. You guys both seem to have that. I seem to woke up to that a couple years ago. So give me your thoughts on that. Why is that true, first of all, and why do so many people fail to recognize that?
Well, in my, and I think you're right, Paul, by the way. The idea that I'm going to chase happiness and it's just going to be there someday, and then everything's solved is, I realized years and years ago that's a fool's mission. I realized that doing things that were meaningful in my life and that would provide me meaning and the people I care about meaning, and whether they're organizations or whatever, that was the meaning, was where it was at. It didn't mean it was going to be easy. In fact, it meant the exact opposite. It wasn't easy. I don't want it to be easy. There's no meaning in easy. It wasn't going to be safe. There's no meaning in safe.
That's right.
So I realized, well, these are all things that are taking me off the path I'm supposed to be on. The path I'm supposed to be on is supposed to be difficult. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. It's supposed to make me grow. It's supposed to make me question. It's certainly going to provide many failures and many opportunities to fail. And that's where the growth and that's where the meaning comes in. And that's where the happiness, if you can get some spurts of that, that's where that comes in. But I think we've been misled and misguided since we're young and in school, that there's this rainbow out there that we're going to get on and find, and everything's, you're going to find happiness and things are going to be easy and safe, and that's not where you want to be. That's a trick. It's an awful trick too. So I just realized relatively early that these things were, they're foolish to chase, and that I was at my best when I had to get creative, when I had to solve problems, when I was doing things that took me out of my comfort zone and made me think differently and therefore become different. And that was what it became about. And the idea of me retiring, we've talked about this, is it's silly. It's never going to happen. Now, does that mean I'm going to live under other people's terms? No, I'm really not. I live under my own for the most part. But I'm not interested in retirement. It's the furthest thing from my mind. What I'm interested in is growth and meaning and experience and freedom. And I get all that, but you don't get that from going to work for somebody else for 40 years. Generally, I'm sure there's an experience out there I'm not aware of, but generally you do not get that. So Paul, I'd be interested in your take on that.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think that this couple of things. I do think that there are greater forces that are at work behind the scenes that have really invited the majority of people, especially going up through the school system that most of us have gone through. I think there's just this strong invitation to look at the 9 to 5, 40-hour a week, be employed, work for a great company, benefits, they'll take care of you, all that kind of mindset. I mean, I think that I think the evidence is pretty clear that in the beginning of the industrial age, this is what the big, powerful corporations needed, is they needed worker bees, and they influenced, societal expectations primarily through the school system. I remember when I was in high school, we would do these silly aptitude tests, and the only option was what kind of job would you be suited for. I mean, nobody talked about business or entrepreneurship or capitalism or creativity or starting something. Like, it was just, what kind of job are you suited for? And then you go get more school, which again is another system that needs to be supported. So what I try to explain to people, and being in the investment business, I have to talk about risk a lot, right? Because people are very fearful often of investing in stocks or investment funds or something like that. And what I explain to people is that real risk is when you're out of control, right? And I can't think of anything more out of control than being employed. Because basically 100% of your compensation is at the whim of that next guy. I heard this one time, Matt. I think you'll enjoy this. Somebody says, "Oh, I got a great secure job." I go, "Really? That's awesome." Here's what I think about job security. You're as secure as the mental health of your immediate supervisor on any given day.
It's perfect. It's so true.
It's so true.
I just get, it's so difficult for me to, I get why it happens. And I'm sure I know there was a time in my life I felt the same way, that the security was in the job. And then then you get in a job and you work with just human beings, right? How secure are you if my security is in the hands of another human being?
That's right.
It doesn't matter how good you are or how, I mean, there's so many variables, right, Paul, that could influence that perceived security. I love that quote. You're as secure as the mental health of the person who basically decides whether you're secure or not.
That's right. That's right. And another piece to that is that, the flip side is true security is when you equip yourself with the skills, the awareness, the ability to deliver to the marketplace something that the marketplace wants. So that's where true security is. It's not in a job. Now, again, I'm not hammering on 9 to 5 or any of that kind of thing, but I'm just saying that when you think about security, what you got to think about is, am I able to deliver something to the marketplace that the marketplace wants, needs, and likely will want and need for an extended period of time? And if you can, as I know you have, Matt, in your businesses, you've filled those niches. You deliver on stuff that people want and need, and so that's true security. It's not a paycheck that somebody else has to, it's at their discretion to issue that paycheck to you or not. So, I know that we don't have a ton of time. I just wanted to share, sort of just, another piece of my macro philosophy is, this is going to sound a bit cliche, but it's just so darn true. And that is that everything you want is on the other side of what it's going to feel safe to do. Always. And the people who live lives in that gray twilight where they know neither victory nor defeat are the people who just choose to always stay on the safe side of that line. They're probably on the safe side of that line in terms of how they are with their family, how they are with their spouse, how they are with their business interests, how they are with their own personal economy. And I just decided, I guess, that life was just too short not to go for it. Like, I'm not going to stay on the safe side of the line. So when the moment came, 30 plus years ago, when I had to make the decision, and I quit my social work job and I went into the business full time, which we don't recommend people do that, but I did it. And I went full time. I went all in 100%. And I remember that my calculus was very, very simple. My calculus was, that I may fail. Like I may not be able to do this. I'd never been in business or sales or anything. I really had no reason to believe I could do this. But what I did know is if I don't try and I wake up when I'm 60 or I wake up when I'm 65 and my life is not the life I want, I just said to myself, there's no way in hell I'm going to look back to my 22-year-old self and say, you know, woulda, coulda, shoulda. What if you'd have tried that business? What if you'd have given it a shot? There's just, and I just made that choice in that instant that there was no way I was going to live with that regret. I might give this everything I have, and I might fall on my face, and all my friends and family, they're telling me I'm crazy to quit my social work job and start getting into financial services and all that kind of stuff. You know, I might fall on my face and they might all laugh at me and I might end up being humiliated and going and getting a job again. I don't know. But I know this, I will have no regrets. I will know that I crossed that line. I went to the other side. And that's all that mattered to me. And bluntly, I think that's all that should matter to anyone, because there's no do-overs, man. You don't get to go 0 to 80 in this life and then have a do-over. That's not how it works. You got one shot, take it. And I did.
Well, Paul, that sounds very familiar with my mindset as well. And I came to the same conclusion at a certain point in my life, and I wasn't much older, honestly. I had a health issue, and that's what kind of motivated me. And I went, I'm not gonna, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna live forever. I tell the same story that ends the same way. You got one shot. And I always feel like I could kick into that Eminem song at that point.
Yeah.
When I'm a terrible singer and a worse rapper, but it's so true. It's like, and the people who learn that early are better off, in my opinion. And frankly, I'm with you. I'd rather go down swinging than stand and than spend a life of mediocrity. And I can't fathom it. I truly can't. And that said, I want to ask you a question. You know, when you're talking to people about investing and your business, do you find that that's the biggest thing to overcome? And are you finding the difference in ages when you're talking to people into different ages, that you have different conversations, or how's that work?
Yeah. I think that there's a big difference based on how somebody grew up, what kind of environment they grew up in. You know, when I got started in financial service 30 years ago, my aunt, my dad's sister, she worked at a local community credit union kind of thing. And she said, so, you know, she had heard that I was going to, you know, leave social work, and it was a bit of a scandal in the family that I was going to do, you know, make this change so early. And she said, so you're going to be selling like mutual funds and stuff? And I go, yeah, we're going to sell mutual funds. And she's like, well, what are they exactly like? And I explained, you know, to her what it was. And she said, well, why would somebody want to do that? Like, why, like everybody just puts their money in the credit union where it's safe. Like, that's just what people do. Like, why would anybody want to put their money in the stock market? That's you know, so, I mean, that was my aunt's perspective. That perspective, I think, was pretty indelible even on my generation, sort of the children of that generation. Mm-hmm. But I do think that fortunately, like I'm not a big say cryptocurrency fan. I you know, I'm sort of you know, jury's out on all that stuff in terms of what the future is going to bring for it. But I'm very grateful for that whole crypto ecosystem, because at the very least, it's got people thinking about deploying their capital to generate returns and to, you know, to do well. Even all the meme stock stuff with GameStop or AMC or whatever, I mean, at least that's creating awareness. So being in the industry and being a part of a group that is about teaching people the right way to do it, I believe, which is to say professionally managed long-term approach, quality, you know, equities, that kind of thing, for the long term. We can take that awareness and the popularity of it, and we can convert that into teaching people, because it's a lot easier to sort of, it's a lot easier to help somebody kind of pivot in something they're already kind of keen about and interested in, than it is to like get somebody who's just cold, unaware or against something, and try to say, hey, you should think about investing. So I think it's been terrific, honestly, the awareness level, and it's allowing a lot of our associates to grow like 10 times faster than I ever did back in the 80s, late 80s, in the 90s. Like Coach here, he's going to build his business, 10, 15, 20x faster than I ever did. So, but I think, Matt, that's a really good point. I mean, that mindset is shifting, and it's shifting toward awareness and enthusiasm for the markets. And I'm just passionate about, I believe that the stock market in America is the engine of freedom, like the engine of freedom, the engine of capitalism is that equity market. And, real estate is great. Real estate's a great asset class. Everybody needs a roof. However, I believe that for most people, the most accessible long-term returns, because you can start by just putting $100 a month away, or whatever fits for a person. It's so accessible that if people have the knowledge and the confidence, which is our job, people get excited about participating in the engine of freedom. And we got a lot of work to do. There's 180 million Americans, Matt, 180 million of them that do not have an investment account, zero, nada, nothing. And so that's a big job, and that's why we're growing so fast, and that's why we're so excited to have great people like Coach here helping us, because we got a big job to do.
Well, you just kind of read my mind, actually, because I didn't know that in terms of the number of people, but my perception is that there's a tremendous number of people in this country who do not invest in any way, and you just said, I mean, it's over half the country, based on your number there. So, what's the biggest deterrent for people?
I know that psychologically people are very reluctant to take action into an area where they have no understanding. I mean, all fear in a human comes from the fear of the unknown, from not understanding. And so when people don't understand something, they basically freeze and they don't take action. And so you've got some people out there who are eager to learn. They're very self-directed, kind of driven, and they'll open up a Robinhood account or an Ameritrade account on their own, and they'll just start doing it. But that's just not most people. Most people just have so much unknown about investing that natural fear barrier of what they don't know just freezes them, and they don't take action. So that's why advisors, I think, are more important today than they've ever been, is because people need that lift over the hump, where a trusted person can say, hey, it's going to be all right, and here's why, and here's the basis for this. And it doesn't take a lot usually, but it just takes that caring, trusted person to just get them to take that first action. And once they get going, then sky's the limit. They get going.
So Matt and Paul, I can already tell as we close this out, this is part one.
I agree completely.
We've got to have a part two. I've been super excited today because I have two of my mentors that for years I was mentoring students and coaching students, and then finally realized I need someone to have as a mentor, right, in the business world. And both you guys have stepped up. I'm glad you've both met finally. And I appreciate it. So we all guaranteeing there's going to be a part two?
I'm in.
I think we should make the part two sooner rather than later, to be honest with you, because there's a whole host of questions that I wanted to ask Paul that I think would help people, help me, help anyone. So anyway, I that's my vote for whatever that's worth.
Perfect. We'll do it sooner and later. There'll be no time limit. We're going to get all these technical issues hammered out, but other than that, it was great today. Hey, thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Matt.
Look forward
Appreciate
to talking
you,
to you, Paul, again. Take care.
All the best. Thank you.
All right.
See ya.